Since the birth of television, game shows have been a ubiquitous presence on many a channel. They're cheap to produce, fun to watch, and viewers playing along at home get a nice boost of confidence when they answer as many questions as the champion. That doesn't mean the game show world has been squeaky clean and controversy-free, however. Even after the quiz show scandals of the 50s stopped networks from scripting game shows for the sake of ratings, multiple issues ranging from cheating to contestants lying about themselves to contestants turning out to be the absolute scum of the earth keep popping up. Here are 10 of the biggest game show scandals of all time. Many children of the 80s look back fondly on Press Your Luck, though less fondly on those pesky whammies that kept appearing to take all the contestants' money. This despite being otherworldly gremlins who wouldn't have anything to spend the money on. They were just hoarding it for hoarding's sake, like little tiny Smorg the Dragons. One contestant who made sure the whammies went back to their homes with nothing was Michael Larson. During his 1984 appearance, he won an incredible $110,237, or $270,000 in today's cash. Winning that much on a skill-based show like Jeopardy is amazing enough, but Press Your Luck is mostly about, luck. Hit the buzzer at the right time and win big prizes. Don't, and the whammies leave you with squat. But never once did Larson hit a whammy. In fact, he seemed to hit nothing but the biggest, most expensive prizes, not to mention a bevy of extra turn options. He just kept playing and playing, making money like a madman. Obviously, the show suspected Larson of cheating and refused to pay his winnings. That is, until the network ran an investigation and realized he wasn't cheating at all. Rather, Larson was simply a huge fan of the show, not to mention a gigantic nerd. While watching, Larson had realized that the game board ran on a highly predictable pattern, so he spent a worrying amount of time recording every episode of the show and analyzing the board. By the time he was ready to play, he knew exactly when to hit his buzzer for maximum profit. Since you can't punish a guy for being clever and for having way too much time on his hands, Larson kept his winnings. Press Your Luck trudged on with a much more randomized board, all but ensuring every contestant going forward would run into at least a couple of those accursed whammies. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire doesn't make it easy to become a millionaire. After a couple of humorously softball questions to kick things off, the difficulty of the show quickly ramps up. You have to be brilliant to win $1 million, or you could do what Army Major Charles Ingram did and blatantly cheat. Actually, don't do what he did. He got in big trouble and we don't want to put you through that. In 2001, Ingram appeared on the UK edition of Millionaire and found himself struggling. After just a few questions, he had used 2 of his lifelines and looked for all the world like he wouldn't last much longer. But then he started getting question after question right. He would hem and haw through virtually every question, repeating each multiple choice as if he were seriously considering it, only to finally settle on one answer that inevitably wound up being right. With that, he was the world's newest rich guy. Or not. Right away, show producers smelt something fishy. Unlike with Press Your Luck, they were correct. As it turned out, Ingram's wife and friend were sitting in the audience and acting as plants. While Ingram danced around each possible answer, his friend would cough as he came upon the correct answer. It was so blatant that the show didn't just rescind the cash prize, they brought criminal charges against all 3 people. They were convicted of the delightfully British charge procuring the execution of a valuable security by deception. They served suspended sentences, meaning no jail time, but the damage to their reputations had already been done. If that wasn't enough, Ingram was essentially drummed out of the army in 2003 after he and his wife got nailed for insurance fraud. That's what happens when your claim to fame is attempted grand larceny on live TV. For a whopping 1 season, 2010's $1 Million Money Drop captivated audiences. The show's hook was that the contestants were given $1 million right away, but had to answer 7 questions correctly in order to keep it. They had to place portions of their money on a series of trapdoors, each signifying an answer. If you placed money on a wrong answer, the door opened, the money dropped, and you lost it forever. That sounds great, except the show kept getting caught insisting their poorly researched answers were correct, when in fact they were not. In the premiere episode, a team of contestants was asked what was sold in stores first, the Macintosh computer, the Walkman, or Post-it notes. They placed $800,000 on Post-its, only for Walkman to be the correct answer. Here's the problem. It wasn't. The internet soon came out with evidence proving Post-its were sold in several test markets before a wide release. The show initially defended their research, only to backtrack days later and admit their research was wrong. They offered the contestants another chance on the show, which never happened as the show got cancelled within the year. Perhaps it got the axe because not too long after, the bad research monster struck again. Another team bet over $500,000 that the most common password in the world was password. They lost as the correct answer was 123456, which is only slightly more difficult than the combination an idiot uses for his luggage. However, just as before, $1 Million Money Drop had done poor research. They based their answer on the data security firm Imperva's research, except Imperva had based their research on exactly one hacking incident from the year before. The contestants sued $1 Million Drop for the money, though the details are fuzzy on whether they got it. Considering the show led the question with, according to Imperva, they may have gotten away with it thanks to the bad research monster's best friend, the trick question fairy. Pasa Palabra was a long-running Spanish game show where regular people paired up with celebrities to play, well, games. There wasn't a set format, so it was more like a variety game show than anything else. The show played host to perhaps the most blatant cheating episode in game show history, albeit one that the show itself laughed off immediately. In 2014, Spanish supermodel Adriana Abenia was one of the celebrity guests, and she and her team were playing Name That Tune. But after a few audio clues, the host realized a buzzing sound and some lights between Abenia's legs. He flat out asked her if she was using a phone, to which she immediately confessed. Abenia, clearly not a music expert, had been using the song identification app Shazam to guess the songs. The app would hear the brief audio clip and seconds later would tell Abenia what song it came from. Unlike other instances of game show cheating, everyone had a right good laugh about the whole thing. The host even commended Abenia's ingenuity for being the only contestant to even think of using Shazam. Whether they reacted like this because Abenia immediately admitted to the cheat or because she was a beautiful celebrity so the show chose not to take what she did too seriously, it's hard to say. Either way, don't cheat if you get on a game show. It's not likely to end in sunshine and lollipops for you the way it did her. If you appear on a quiz show and have no idea what the answers are, you're probably hosed. Unless, of course, you brazenly cheat, or, to look at it another way, play the people around you and not the game. That's what Khaled El-Katateni did in 2014. He appeared on Australia's game show Millionaire Hot Seat and walked away with $100,000, despite having no clue what the correct answers were to most of his questions. Instead of simply guessing, El-Katateni utilised his greatest strength, reading the room. He started repeating questions and going through the answers, looking for slight hints on the host's face that might reveal when he hit the correct answer. In addition, he observed the crowd and took note of when they subtly reacted to what wound up being the correct answer. By studying these micro-expressions, he was able to hit the right answer each time and walk away with the show's top prize. After the show aired, a confident El-Katateni confessed to what he had done, mostly because he knew he couldn't get in trouble. The show naturally investigated, but ultimately concluded that while he may not have followed the spirit of the game, he didn't do anything illegal. All he did was utilize a bit of psychology, and for the time being, psychology isn't against the law. Since the 50s, The Price is Right has entertained millions of people, most of whom were staying home from school or work while sick and needed something to watch. But in recent years, the game has undergone massive internal changes, all thanks to one insanely determined contestant. Terry Kanice was a former meteorologist and was thus skilled at detecting patterns. He was also a huge Price is Right fan, and over the years he noticed many patterns on the show. Namely, that they displayed the same prices time and again and the prices never changed. Figuring few others had caught onto this pattern, Kanice realized that if he could get on the show, he could absolutely own it. And so he did. Thanks to a unique combination of essentially knowing the cost of every prize mixed with blind luck, as he couldn't control whether he got called down to play and he couldn't will the big wheel to land on the money spots, so he found himself in the Showcase Showdown. This time, his knowledge of patterns mixed with blind luck helped him make history. He knew his prize package was around $23,000 based on years of studying the game, but he couldn't figure out the exact dollar amount, so he rolled the dice with numbers significant to his personal life. Thus, he bid $23,743, which turned out to be 100% on the nose. Rather than jubilantly celebrating Knice as the first contestant to ever perfectly bid a showcase showdown, host Drew Carey announced the feat quietly and morosely. He was certain Knice had cheated and triggered a scandal that would bring the entire show to its knees. But no such thing happened because Knice did not cheat. Like Michael Larson before him, he detected predictable patterns in the show and exploited them mercilessly. That's not breaking the rules. That's simply not attending nearly enough parties on the weekend. Don't expect to get on Price is Right and replicate Knice's feat. Immediately afterwards, the show changed everything. Now the prizes are far more random, prices change all the time, and if the producers sniff you out as an overly smart fellow with a knack for analysing absolutely everything to death, don't expect to come on down. The Great Food Truck Race is just what it sounds like. Food trucks compete to see who gets a whole bunch of money to take their business to the next level. This involves getting customers to your truck naturally. Whoever has the least amount of cash after a day's work goes home. Or whoever cheats in the dumbest manner imaginable goes home, like what happened in 2011. A truck business called Corilla Barbecue was competing on the Great Food Truck Race, but found they weren't making nearly enough money. So to make it seem like they had tons of business that day, they deposited $2,700 of their own money into the till. That worked about as well as you might expect. Indeed, at the end of the episode, the ominous voiceover who announced eliminations outed Corilla as dirty, dirty cheaters by explaining that all money has to be matched to a legitimate receipt. Obviously, $2,700 of Corilla's money had no receipts, exposing the truck's fraud. Then the soothing voice straight up said, "Corilla, you guys tried to cheat and you got caught." Corilla claimed they would tell their side of the story once the non-disclosure agreement ran out. This has never happened, which means either the NDA is eternal or Corilla realized they were in the wrong and just wanted a convenient excuse to get out of explaining themselves. When a game show lasts exactly one episode, you know things went off the rails. And few shows went further off the rails than the 2000 embarrassment Who Wants to Marry a Multimillionaire? It was the dating game taken to its logical extreme. A super rich bachelor named Rick Rockwell chose a bride from among 50 eligible bachelorettes, but rather than a courting session after, they were simply married on the spot. There were two major problems. First, it was a terrible idea that made women look like gold diggers. Second, Rick Rockwell wasn't rich, but rather quite poor. He had lied about having money, and Fox, desperate to get the show rolling, cast him without bothering to investigate him. Had they done so, they would have not only learned that he was broke, but that his last name wasn't really Rockwell. They also would have learned that years prior, Rick Bulkey's former girlfriend secured a restraining order against him after bouts of domestic violence. The bride, Dava Conga, filed for an annulment almost immediately. They didn't consummate the marriage, and Conga even felt disgusted that Bulkey tried to kiss her on the altar. It almost sounds like a game show marriage should never have been a thing. Don't expect to see this show as a midsummer rerun anytime soon. Here's a scandal where no cheating occurred and where nobody tried to game the system. It's still a big scandal because the contestant in question wound up being a fugitive conman wanted by the FBI. Great background checking, guys. The 80s game show Super Password had a man named Patrick Quinn on, and he played very well. Quinn wound up winning $58,600, but the problem with being a wanted criminal on TV is that your victims might be watching. That's what happened here, as several people called the show to tell them their winning contestant was a fraudster named Kerry Ketchum, who had stolen thousands from them. One of the parties who contacted the show was the Secret Service. They wanted to nab Ketchum but were having difficulties. Luckily for them, Ketchum actually called the show, asking if he could pick up his check rather than have it mailed to him. The show agreed, and as soon as Ketchum entered the building, the Secret Service went after him and quickly arrested him. It turned out that Ketchum had committed forgery, credit card fraud, and somehow swindled a car dealership out of a new set of wheels. Worst of all, he faked his wife's death so he could collect on her insurance policy. He wound up sentenced to 5 years in prison for his crimes, and he never did receive his prize money. Oh, and if you believe in real-life foreshadowing, one of the passwords Patrick Quinn guessed during his appearance on the show? Phony. Speaking of the dating game, here's a story that doesn't involve any cheating. It does, however, contain one of the all-time worst casting decisions in game show history. The time the dating game let a child rapist on their show. In 1978, a man named Rodney Alcala appeared on the dating game as Bachelor Number 1. Despite fellow bachelor Jed Mills finding him creepy and very unlikable and rude and imposing as though he was trying to intimidate, he charmed the night's bachelorette Cheryl Bradshaw into picking him as her date. Thing is, he never should have been allowed on the show. 10 years prior, Alcala had raped an 8-year-old girl and was subsequently convicted of the crime. Dating Game didn't catch that, however, merely describing him on air as a photographer who enjoyed motorcycles and skydiving. His true colours must have shined through after the show, as Bradshaw actually declined to go out with him, finding him just as creepy as Mills did. That feeling wound up being for a good reason too. Just a year later, Alcala murdered a 12-year-old girl. He killed at least 7 people, perhaps upwards of 130, before finally being apprehended in 1979, convicted and ultimately sentenced to death 3 separate times, most recently in 2010. Even scarier is that many of his murders took place before his appearance on the dating game. This means the charming, long-haired, handsome man who won himself a date was already a pedophile rapist and serial killer. However, he had not been arrested for any murders at the time. He had, however, been convicted of child rape, and that alone should have been enough for the show to ban him. At least Bradshaw was smart enough to stay away from him.